really fortunate to have Stephen Reid join us. Absolute pleasure, Stephen, to have you with us this evening. So, got to know you pretty well over the last year or so. I don't think you need much introduction, but just to obviously let people know, as Paul just mentioned, you're currently at Nottingham Forest. You've been assistant for the Scotland national team. You've also worked at Crystal Palace as a player. You've had X amount of Premier League games. We put it all out on the programme. And you've had a pretty interesting, I think, life on and off the pitch, I think it's fair to say, which we'll dive into. So, again, as Paul mentioned, anyone want any questions, you can raise your hand, put them in the chat, and feel free to ask. So I'll kick it off with the first question. As a player, who was the best manager you worked under and why?
Probably, first of all, thanks everyone for joining tonight. Thanks for having me on, Steve and Paul. Obviously got to know each other pretty well over the last year, and I'm sure we'll dip into some football stuff and some of the off-field stuff as well that we've spoken about over the last year. But I'd probably take it way back to when I was at Millwall, actually, when it first really started getting going for me on a football level. And that was when Mark McGee came into the club, brought a coach in with him called Ray Harford. And what made him good for me was straight away was the trust that he had in me, the belief that he had in me, because we came through, I was a little bit before you, but kind of similar-ish generations of kind of YTS and scholarships coming through the system. And it was really tough. I found the transition really tough from leaving secondary school and then going straight into a first team environment at Millwall, which was everyone trained at the same centre, everyone in the same building, everyone kind of in and around each other, which was great. But at the same time, it was really tough going from that kind of protective kind of bubble and family life into a real alpha male dominated world. So I found that really tough, the way people spoke to each other, the way the older YTS lads would speak to us, first year YTS players, the interactions with the first team. And I think straight away it put me on edge. It put me on edge a little bit, you know, in terms of feelings of judgment and how I was spoken to. So when Mark McGee actually came into Millwall as manager, that was one of the first times I kind of really felt that trust and belief in me. And I think from that moment on, it was, you know, things from a football point of view went really well, despite obviously other things that I'm sure we'll come to starting to develop with being involved in the professional world of football.
Have you muted everyone? Yeah, I was on mute there. Yeah, I see a couple of people. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sorry. So I was just asking the question. So you mentioned there about a few, like how you the transition basically as from a YTS into the first team, and you found that alpha male sort of change from difficult. Do you think it's changed over the years? I know now you're a coach, you're no longer a player, but do you think it's different looking in?
I think it is. I do think it is. Obviously, we're going back to the era of, you know, jobs of you're starting your YTS. I know some clubs still now, there's different ways that the YTS player or scholars now, you know, do the jobs. But back then it was quite tough, actually. And, you know, you're talking about toothbrushes in urinals, you're painting the changing rooms, you're doing all sorts at the stadium. And back then, I did find it really tough in that transition, just going back to that again, in terms of, I sort of look back at it now and it was almost a trauma to the system, going from literally finishing my GCSEs at secondary school, and a month later, you're just thrown into this professional world, really. And I think now it has changed. I think there's more, from my experiences and what I see now, there's more respect. There's certain processes in place where players, if there is issues going on at the club, they're taken more seriously, you know, without fear of you not getting the next contract, or you're going to be left out of the team at the weekend. I think things have changed in that way. There's still issues. There's still, I think, a lot of fear in younger players in actually speaking up and, you know, letting people know if there's something going on that's not quite right. Because I knew, even at that young age now, that I was sorry. I knew that I didn't like being spoken to a certain way. I knew that it wasn't right. You know, I remember the manager, or one of my first managers at the club, and being spoken to in a certain way, and I knew it wasn't right. Even then, I wasn't one of these that thought, well, it is okay to speak to me that way. That's how I'm going to coach, or that's how I'm going to speak to players in my professional journey, or speak to younger players. I knew it was wrong to speak to young players like that. So there's kind of one aspect of me thinks it built a resilience in me to actually progress and come through at Millwall and go through the experiences that I went through. And I can look at it another way and think, you know, if I'd been spoken to in a certain way, you know, be treated in a certain way, maybe I could have gone to another level. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. You know, some aspects of it, I think, built a toughness in me and a resilience in me that in the wrong way of doing it, you know, in an inappropriate way of doing it. So it's sort of mixed. I've had many conversations about that on coaching courses, in, you know, coaching summits that I've been on, in actually the experiences of that resilience and how that affected me and many other players on their own journey in playing and in coaching.
Was it what you thought it was going to be? You mentioned about kind of leaving school and almost going straight into kind of that environment. Was that what you thought it was going to be?
The moment that it changed for me was pretty much when I signed the first professional contract and was playing first team football. Up to that point, despite some of the ways in which you're spoken to and the toughness of the environment coming through at Millwall, etc. It was only when I think I broke into the first team and I became a professional footballer that things for me felt different. You know, the pressure, the stress, the expectations, the obviously fans coming to game, what 3 points actually means now, you know, to your teammates, to the senior pros, to the club. You know, you're then a professional player. You know, how does that then change the dynamic in your friendship group, in your family? Now all of a sudden you're earning decent money, so that brings with it a pressure at times, and certainly a lot of players now, to then support family members. You know, friendships can change a little bit. You know, your social dynamics when you're going out and you're all of a sudden seen as the footballer, the superstar, whatever it might be. For me, that's when it really changed. When all of a sudden it stopped being about fun and enjoyment. It became pressure, it became stress. You know, feelings of anxiety that, by the way, you know, me, you know, the three of us, Stephen and Paul, we've kind of spoken about this, and my sort of mental health issues that I've had will go way back into secondary school, actually back into primary school. But I think actually going into the, you know, high pressure world, like football, like sport, like it might be acting, it might be done, whatever it is, that just magnifies and almost pours petrol on, you know, mental health issues, like it certainly did for me. It's kind of escalated to a different kind of level.
If there are any aspiring young players here and possibly kind of heading into that same situation that you might be heading into, do you have any kind of advice or top tips for kind of trying to manage, I guess, that degree of anxiety or stress or anything like that? Because I guess that's a really big change, right?
It is, and I'm seeing, and obviously with the journey I've been on in the last year, it's so common, and not just talking about young players coming through, talking about coaches in their 50s that have read my story and what I've been through, that have gone through all of that and not said a word to anyone, and now going into their 50s as a coach. But going all the way back to the one benefit that I had, I guess, was that I had a quite a close-knit family at home where I was comfortable in sharing it with my mum, issues that I was going through, you know, my anxiety, the panic attacks, you know, being able to talk to her about it, because in my opinion, you just can't get through it on your own, especially to progress in the often at times brutal world of football. You need support along the way. You need somebody to talk to, someone that you trust. It doesn't, by the way, it doesn't have to be someone in the football club, and that's completely fine, just as long as that support network is there. And I get that totally. You know, I still look back at stages of my career and actually think, would have I said anything back when I was a YTS at Millwall? I'm not sure I would have, but I had a close, you know, network of support around me. I had a mum that worked in a mental health hospital close to where I was brought up. She understood it. She got it. I got support. You know, the first time I went through therapy was probably when I was around 15, 16. So I, you know, had that support quite early. So I was never embarrassed to speak about it at home. So the first thing for me would be, it would be really tough to do it on your own. So it is finding someone that you trust. It might be someone at the football club. It might be, and it doesn't have to be a coach. You know, we get it now at first team level. Some players connect better with a masseur, with a physio, with the kit man, with, you know, someone else in law, someone that they connect with, that they can speak to. So it doesn't have to be someone in the football club. It might be close friend, close family. Obviously, there's a lot of initiatives going on. There's the PFA and Sporting Chance that I do a little bit of work for as well. So there's a lot of support out there, you know, more so than ever before. But it's really important that you don't feel like you can do it on your own. I think to give yourself as a young player the best chance is really important to express it, because it can eventually manifest itself in all different, you know, problematic kind of behaviours.
So important. I just want to say one. Sorry, Paul. I just wanted to say one thing. Sorry, I just feel it's so like it's so true. Like I was speaking with Sue, I can see on the call about this yesterday. It's not just about speaking to anyone, you know. It's about speaking to someone that you trust in, and whether that. I mean, the physio used to always be a safe space for me. Do you know what I mean? When I was in there getting treatment, it'd be the place where. Don't get me wrong, it can become a bit where it's the place to go and moan. Do you know what I mean? And say the gaffer session's crap, this and the other. It can also become that, but. Away from that negative side of it, it was also just a space where I can come and go flipping out, like just vent about something, release it. Also the kit man, like it's amazing. Like as you mentioned them, I'm smiling because I'm thinking, yeah, there's so many of those people around the club that I would use. So it wouldn't necessarily be. I mean, nowadays as player care, I'm still missing that bit as in the first team. I kind of missed it. It's more player care now for the younger generation, which is great. But it's like. That would be someone there to talk to, but that might work for you, and for me it might be the kit man, and for someone else it might be somebody else, you know. So I think that's a really good message.
Because it does have to be the right, because as we all know in football at times it is a ruthless, harsh, brutal world at times. So it can be the wrong person as well. It needs to be someone that you really can trust, that is going to keep it, you know, private, just as long as. You know, we mentioned before the call, there's no safeguarding issues, anything like that going on. That it does remain private, and you get the professional help. And you know, that's the key as well. If it does need a little bit more than kind of a arm around the shoulder or a chat, that you're getting the right professional help. You know, that's crucial as well. So yeah, you got to be sure that that person is someone, you know, that you trust. But like you say, it's like I have open, honest conversations with first team players now, and I've done over the last few years. But some players wouldn't dream of coming to a first team coach and sharing some of it. It might be someone else at the club.
Okay, we'll get on to that as well in a bit, actually, Stephen, about kind of players coming to you and possibly kind of why they maybe feel safe. But we've had a couple of questions in the chat feed. So this is a question for you. So what do you see as the main changes to come in coaching over the next 5 years?
I think it's developed over the last few years that I've been coaching. It's sort of almost gone from a one-size-fits-all approach of you just get your kind of opposition team meeting and analysis, but now it's very much sort of individualized, as the training sessions are a lot of the time, in like position-specific works, unit meetings, a lot more individual meetings. Like at Forest now, not giving away too many secrets, but we all pick up little group of players that we kind of sort of look after on an individual basis, in terms of, you know, clips, in terms of, you know, the individual meetings. It's becoming, the issue with that is, it's all well and good when you're at a Premier League level, and you can have an extra coach or two or employ extra staff. I think the difficulty can be the lower down the pyramid, where the finance isn't quite there. It's actually getting right. If you've got a squad of 25, 30 players, it's giving that individual input and individual help to the players when the manpower, you know, women power is not there to deal with the amount of players that are in the organisation. And because I think our head analyst, actually, he's quite big on the analysis side of things. And I think there was a question there once, like, what's the number one most important thing that the players need or want? And it is time. You know, and I look back at that and I think it's not necessarily the best. Well, it wasn't actually. My favourite coaches and best coaches probably weren't the best tacticians or, you know, delivered the best training sessions. It was the ones that actually made you feel, you know, you feel part of it, gave you that trust, that belief. And that's still the same now. The players want time. They want you to care about them, want you to get to know them a little bit more. You know, you might get the odd one or two that, you know, just very, you know, I've had that as well, you know, very kind of not single-minded, but just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. They, you know, don't want chit chat and small talk. They just want to be kind of told. You do get players like that, and that's fine. But at the same time, I think the bad experiences that players have had in their career, and it might have even been at a young age, which has put them completely off football, is just not being spoken to in the right way. Even if it's bad news getting delivered, I think more often than not, if players are being spoken to and you know, the reasons have been explained, I think they can accept that a little bit more than just seeing it on social media that they've been released, or getting a message or an email. You know, players, although it might hurt, they just will want that bit of time and being spoken to and being given the reasons why.
So good, like someone. Sorry, Paul, go on.
Okay.
No, I was going to say, it's so good to hear this from you, who's someone who's in football right now at a Premier League level, because I, as a current player, I can vouch for everything you've just said. It's like, what I want the most is time. I want to be spoken to, whether that's in a good way or bad way, where I'm told that you're not good enough, so you're not playing. Like, as long as it's constructive, you know, and I can understand it and I can process it. But so important that I'm given some kind of time, you know, like I understand, and I do understand, this is not a dig at managers or coaches, absolutely not, because we've got to look at above that and go, well, the managers have 4 or 5 games nowadays, so they're looking at their 11 thinking, I've got to get results, the fans are on me, the chairman's on me, I haven't got time to go and speak to the number 24 in the squad, or number 25 in the squad. But I'd say my experience over the last 15 years has been the 14 or 15 players who aren't playing, who are in your squad, they're the ones who get you the sack, because they're the ones that start feeling unloved, feeling unwanted. And when you've got to call on them, because naturally injuries happen, suspensions, everything falls into place, those are the 14 you go back to. So it's like, it's so important that you give some time to them in whichever way you can. And like I'm not here saying it's easy. I mean, I'm not a manager, and you're very, very close to a manager, so you would know probably how tight he is for time. But certainly, just as you're speaking, as it's coming up for me, just like, yeah, how much do I want that as a player?
And it's tough, though. I've got to be honest as well. I've been coaching first team level last 8.5 years now. I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. I've had moments where I know there's a difficult conversation there, and I'm not feeling great myself today, actually. I'm struggling. You know, I've had my moments of struggle in my coaching journey, and I've avoided difficult conversations because maybe I've not been in the best place to deal with that conversation, or I'm thinking about how I'm actually going to start that conversation, because what can I say? He's been left out. He's struggling to get back in the team at the minute. I know at times as a player, you might as well, Caulks, where it's, you almost don't want to hear it as well. Sometimes a coach coming over and keep working hard, and you get back in the team. Well, hold on, I've not been in the team it's not easy. but it's just, you've got to keep banging that drum. You've just got to keep, talking in the canteen in the morning. It's still just being, I'd probably explain it better, as in you might sort of relate to it a little bit as well. Some managers, when you're injured or you're out of the team, literally would just walk straight past you, or don't want anything to do with players that are not in that, first, starting team or whatever it might be. But every morning, whether a player's in the squad, out the squad, training with the 21s, in the group, whatever it is, I still treat every player the same way. And I try to do that across the training ground, whether it's kitchen staff, whether it is, whoever it might be. It doesn't really make any difference to me in the building, whether it's star player or kitchen staff. I think creating that environment and that culture in the building goes a long way. And Joe Worrell said it when we won the playoff final, actually, about Steve Cooper, about the FaceTimes on days off and stuff like that. He's quite incredible with stuff like that. If he senses something, he'll FaceTime players on the day off, go and meet them off-site, go and have a bite to eat. He's on it. He's really on it with that kind of stuff. We have our regular meetings. We just make sure that we're, picking up the individual players that need picking up. Again, there might be one or two that have not quite had as much time because they've not been playing, but we'll make sure, like we had a player that had not played at all in pre-season, but I got the analyst to get a few of his clips together from best practice in training, and just had a good sit down with him, good chat, look through some of the training bits, and just kind of did it that way. Doesn't always have to be because you're playing, you're kind of getting the clips from the game, which we do. It might be actually, right, let's get some stuff from training and have a little talk through it. And actually, like we spoke about before, just have a chat, what you're thinking, what's happening, what your thoughts going forward, how you're dealing with it all, how's the family, how's I think a dog or two as well. Just actually just sitting one-to-one, nice private little room, and just having a chat that's not just, right, is you in possession, is you out of possession, what do you think of this, what do you think of that? It's actually, I think sometimes they're the ways that you really kind of get in with players. And also on the back of that, once they feel that trust, you can actually, I think, be at times a bit firmer with them because they know it's coming from a good place. I've had that before. Once you've sort of built that trust, you can actually start, right, come on then, demanding a little bit more.
I think it's a really good point as well. And I know multiple conversations I've had with Stephen is around all you want is that communication. A consistent level of communication is really, really key, isn't it? We've had another question in here as well. Question for Reid. So Forest fan now living in Southern California. It might be somewhat different to back home, but you set up your own agency supporting mental health in young players. Any advice for a fellow sufferer thinking of setting up their own business?
Probably obviously goes without saying, do your research, into what you're thinking of doing, who you're thinking of helping, what's currently available at the moment to players in who you might be working with. So it's an interesting one, actually. When I kind of made the decision, because when I left Crystal Palace and I was kind of flirting with the idea of going alone and starting up something myself, I just left Crystal Palace. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what it would look like. And after a few months, the phone rings, another coaching role, and I'm back in. The difference when I left Forest last summer was that did a bit of homework, set up the business, business account, work with the analyst to get the presentation put together. What does it look like? My experiences, spoke to people, went out and sort of into the field, if you like, spoke to a few directors of football, spoke to a few managers, a few players, a few coaches. What's the need out there at the minute? How could I sort of fit into that, and how could I help? Qualifications, I think it is a big one as you carry on in the journey. I think it's really important. I've done my level 2 and level 3 counselling course. I did a mentoring course with the LMA as well, and obviously a couple of steps away from being fully qualified in a couple of areas. So that's key as well. I think that can open up different opportunities maybe within organisations, because I actually felt at times working on my own all the time, I actually missed being around people and missed a bit of communication and missed being part of, a team as well. So I think it's ticking as many boxes as you can, and sort of knowing the market a little bit as well, and seeing who exactly is the group that I want to be working with, and maybe if there's some local clubs or local organisations, whatever it might be, just doing as much research, asking as much as you can, having as many meetings as you can, and obviously over LinkedIn over a number of months, you sort of see myself, and Caulker has been out and about, and yourself, Paul. You've got to actually get out there and try different things as well. Take yourself out of the comfort zone with, might be a couple of talks, it might be going into an organisation, whatever it might be. And a lot of that was very uncomfortable, by the way.
Yeah, but wicked feedback. I've read some of it. The feedback's incredible, Steve. I think this one's a little bit kind of tongue-in-cheek as well. There's a winky face on there, and I think he might have had the nickname One Size. But how good was Fitzhall?
I'd only played with him for a brief spell actually at QPR. And actually, sort of tying into what we've been speaking about, it was a really tough spell for me, that on the back of looking like I was going to be leaving Blackburn. So I went to QPR for a month's loan, and it was at the time where it was Briatore and Palladini, and the club was a mess. Change of manager within that time, so it was kind of, never really got to see how good he actually was, but he was a top player. Ian Dowie definitely thought he was a player. I think he took him everywhere. But now he's doing great things now in the agency world. I know he's doing a good job in looking after his players. But that QPR spell was not one of my favourites in football, unfortunately.
The next one I'm waiting.
Experience. No, sorry, I was just going to say, funny enough, I had a similar experience at QPR. Honestly, it's like something about that place. Good club, but there's something about it. Doesn't quite tick.
That was a tough time.
Yeah.
We've got another question. I'm quite interested in the answer to this one, actually. What building blocks did you put in place with Steve Clarke to help enhance the Scottish team, and what will the score be tomorrow night?
I'm going to sit on the fence tomorrow. I think it's going to be a draw, and what an incredible job he's doing at the minute, Steve. And I don't know, I think it was a transitional period at that time we went in, because we got off to a horrendous start. We had some tough games against Belgium and Russia, even to a point where things weren't looking great. I think questions at that time were being asked whether it was the right fit, what's going to happen going forward. But, I think some players came to the end of their international career, and with that came some opportunity for others. I think some of the younger players at that time got their opportunity to kind of grow themselves into leaders themselves, like John McGinn and obviously Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney, Scott McTominay now. And talking about top players, by the way, you need top players. I think that's a given at that level. You do need, and I think that's the beauty of what they've got at the minute. They've got a few players now playing at the very top level in Premier League football. I think, reflecting back to my time with the Republic of Ireland, it was always a decent team, but you had some outstanding individuals within that. Roy Keane, obviously top midfielder, you had Damien Duff, you had Robbie Keane, you had Richard Dunn at the time. So you sort of had a workman-like team, but within that you had a few players that had the X factor. And I kind of can see that a little bit with Scotland at the minute. It's a very, very good team, but within that you've got some outstanding individual players as well. But the whole feel of it, even back to my time, it just felt like a family in there. It felt like that Republic kind of set up where players wanted to be there. I think back to my early days in football, and I knew a few players that would be in and around the England setup, and it didn't feel that way at all for them. It felt for them like there was a lot of cliques, a lot of kind of, different clubs on different tables, but I think with Scotland now, well, I know for a fact that there's a real togetherness within that squad, and that's just built over time, built with us qualifying for the Euros, and it looks like they're gonna get across the line. Well, it might be before they even play another game in the qualification. So it's just a real good spirit, and obviously a top manager as well.
I think in answer to your question, I think you take all the credit, Steve. Let's give you Steve Clarke did nothing.
But also a little bit of that, to a lesser extent, a little bit of that was, checking up on players at the clubs as well. You're going to their games, you're checking in on the injured players when they're getting a knock after a weekend. Just that little bit of communication, just to let them know that you're watching or going to the game, or you're there if they need a chat or a call. And Steve's brilliant at that. I think Kieran Tierney did a bit of press last week. Obviously found himself out the Arsenal team for big periods over the last few months, but that constant dialogue from Steve, keeping in touch with him, seeing how he's doing, sounded like a little bit of advice with his move to Sociedad as well. Just comes back to that communication one as well. But
can I add something to that as well, Reid? I remember, because at that time I was half. Well, not half. I was looking to get back involved in Scotland. I had the sniffs as a young player, chose to play for England, but then not played for England for a large period of time, and was interested in certainly having a conversation around Scotland. What you're saying here isn't BS. Like, you picked up the phone. Do you mean I called you? You picked up the phone. We had a conversation. You didn't even know me. You didn't know me, but you heard me. I just said, look, this is what I'm thinking. It's what I'm. Is there any conversation we can have around this? And we did. We had a really good conversation. We had a couple of conversations, actually. And then I had a conversation with Steve Clarke as well. So just to sort of mirror what you're saying, it helped so much as a player on the outside. I didn't know you, dropped you a text, said, sure, let's have a call. And like, just knowing. And nothing materialised. I did end up playing for Scotland. You guys did end up calling me up. But it was just, I felt respected. I felt heard. And, like that feeling it leaves with me is like, I wish you guys all the best. Where sometimes like you can get ignored or something. It's like, just start picking up resentments unnecessarily, So I'm not saying everyone should take your call, but, just what you have as a human being is for me, is a lot of respect. I've got a lot of respect for you because you have time for other people. And those players, as I said, you didn't even know me. I wasn't a friend. I wasn't an old teammate. You gave me your time. So just to mention on that note, as you're talking here, it's like, that's a real story. It's not, you're not just talking pie in the sky. Like, you did that for me. So there's no surprise for me why Scotland have now got success.
I also think it's just making sure that any coaches on here kind of just heed that advice of just bringing the human element into it. The players that aren't in the that aren't playing regularly, just making sure you make them still feel kind of really part of it, because it goes a massively long way, clearly, right?
Well, that's the key bit as well, because I think we get in. It's not a dangerous point, but everything now has become so, like, you go online and everything's analysed to the nth degree, and so much tactical information, and we're seeing so much on training sessions, and we just got to remember it's really getting to know the players as well, and how you make the player feel is, for me, in my personal opinion, is far more important than any tactical information that you're going to give to a player. Is that time? Is that kind of getting to know them? Is hearing them? Is talking to them? But I think there's a tipping point where, and I get it as well. I see a lot of stuff online. I'm thinking, wow, that session looks unbelievable. And then I flip back into a bit of my insecurities and imposter syndrome, thinking, wow, it looks like a much better coach than me. Like, that session looks unreal. I'm way off it. So I still get them feelings as well. But then I sort of got to remind myself of the journey that I've been on, what I feel is important, what seems to have worked over my kind of 8 years of coaching, is just not forgetting, actually, if you've got that, because I think you can almost teach that at times, is the actual tactical side of it and the coaching. I think just start getting used to that human side of it. And if you've got that, that's a super strength for the players.
Definitely. And look, we've got a question. Ross, we'll come back to you and let you unmute towards the end if it's reasonably long-winded. So I'll head on to kind of Lee Wood's question. So a question for both Stephens. Knowing your own experiences, the lack of support you received, and how you've come out the other side of it as the individuals you have both become, will be providing higher levels of support to the players you are working with, or allow them to face similar challenges for them to grow as an individual. Is that a question or is that a comment? So a question for both Stephens. Knowing your own experiences, the lack of support, maybe did the lack of support you received and how you've come out the other side as individuals you've both become, will you be providing higher levels of support? So both of you, will you be providing higher levels of support because of basically your own experiences?
You hope so. I think with obviously the initiative and what you've set up, Colts, with offering the academy service as well, I think it's going to be quite an important part of that journey for sure. I still think for me it's just I'm aware of it more, or aware of it with my own journey that I've been on. Particularly I had horrific injuries and 10 surgeries, so I always make a beeline for the physio room for obvious reasons, really, because I had managers that never went in there. I had managers that really just concentrated on the starting 11. If you was injured, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. So I'm always in there checking in on the injured players to see how they're doing, especially the long-term ones. We've had a couple actually at the club. So I'm definitely more kind of in tune with that. I think with the players themselves, I still think it's kind of got to come from sort of them. I don't think you can kind of pressure players to, share anything, or I think with what I've shared over the last year, I think it's out there and I've been quite open about it. That allowed one player in particular in pre-season to approach me, and we ended up having an hour's conversation, around the issues they were going through. He'd seen what I'd been going through. I think with it just being out there with what I've shared, that might allow players to feel a little bit more comfortable if they wanted to do so themselves.
Yeah, I would second that, certainly. So a lot of players have tended to gravitate towards me because I'm very open. So I share my own experience, and kind of people take from it what they want, really. I don't go searching for the players to ask, are you okay, you okay, you okay? Because one, I think it'd be quite suffocating, and two, it's exhausting. So I heard you mention it earlier, but it hasn't really come up in proper conversation. Just how important it is that the coaches have some kind of care, because it's all about, oh yeah, we've got to give more time to the players, more time to the players, more time to the players. But if you're Steve Cooper, using him as an example at Forest, and he's got a squad of 25, and then his coaching staff underneath that, which might be another 10 these days, plus physios, plus, it's like, that's a lot. That's 50, 55 people under one roof that he's now taking care of. So from my own experience, it definitely, for sure, it's something so close to my heart that I want to care for other people, but I have to boundary it. That was my point on this. I could talk all day long about the support I offer for people, but just because it hasn't really been mentioned, it's just that boundary, just boundarying it, going, right, okay, I've given all I can, and now the rest is down to the player, because I've got my own mental health to take care of, and sometimes take it on, I've got nowhere to then offload it. So just sort of, just wanted to mention that point, because I know actually a few people on this call, and I know how much they do for people, and I know that they're in a similar situation where they just take it on, and it's like, right, where's your release as a coach or as a mentor, whatever title you want to give yourself. So yeah.
And that's the difficult thing about coaching, is what I'd say, and that's probably the bit that got me to the point where I leave Crystal Palace burnt out effectively. I was flying back from a family holiday and I just could not go back in for pre-season. I was just physically, mentally exhausted and needed to take myself out of that situation. Because when you're a coach, there's probably a few coaches on the call with, you go in the building first thing and you've got to be energizing constantly. When you're on the training field, you've got to be enthusiastic, energetic, you've got to be quite loud at times, and you've got to drive training sessions at times. And that comes at a cost, of exhaustion and tiredness and dealing with your own kind of mental health issues. And And that is a crucial one to manage. Like even now, I come off the call, I'm family in London, I'm going to drive back up to Nottingham, back into training. You know, usually on average, we get 1 day off a week to get my day at home. Even today, I've not really been able to switch off. I've been quite vacant today because I'm looking at some individual bits. I'm looking at Burnley, you know, ahead of our game when we're playing next Monday. We've got other bits coming in from the answer. It's a constant balancing act. You know, it's not easy, but I've got my mechanisms. I still check in with someone when I feel myself kind of getting to a level, because my usual habit is going the other way and kind of withdrawing a little bit, maybe not answering the phone as much, maybe not responding as much. But with all the work, hopefully, that I've done over the last year, I've really kind of, I know now if I've not done my exercise for a couple of days now, I start to have a little wobble. If I have a heavy weekend food, and like the weekend, as you know, Colt, so I had a day out with a couple of friends. So even that, I've got to manage the lifestyle. And I found over the last 2.5 months I've been back in football full time, by doing that just puts me in the best place possible for me, hopefully going in the building and being at my best. Because if I'm not at my best and coaches in the room and not, and then it's really difficult to see it and even recognize it in others. Because when you're feeling that way, it's kind of all consuming about yourself. Is really difficult to spot it in other people.
Definitely. Look, we've had quite a few questions in now, so we're going to quick fire. So no pressure, Stephen, but we're going to try and kind of fire through these to make sure we do it within the next 15. Are there any tips or tricks you or the coaching team have used to change the mood in the club when the team are on a losing streak and the heads are down around the club?
I think these sessions are really important. You know, and it might be a period of bad results, whatever it might be. I think the sessions become really important. They need to be maybe a little bit shorter, sharper, a little bit livelier, a bit brighter, a bit more enjoyment for the players, rather than something where it might be sort of static and standing around. But I've got to be honest, in general, it's kind of, we're quite structured in how we operate, in sticking to what we do in terms of the individual stuff, the unit meetings, making sure that we're, you know, picking up our players that we need to pick up. You know, it's maybe an extra chat. It might be at the end of a session, you just sort of gravitate towards a player and you just stay out in the training field for 10, 15 minutes longer. But we kind of sort of, we're quite structured in sticking to what we do. But, you know, it could be the odd team get together, which we still do. Staff get together, you know, having a debrief with the staff. What can we sort of change? Because we've obviously not got all the answers. You know, it might be us having a staff meal out, or getting the players together for similar, or like I say, it might just be a real nice, bright training session just to get everyone, you know, get everyone in a good place.
So basically just trust the process as much as you possibly can with a couple of tweaks.
Yeah, I think so.
This one's coming from Lloyd Edwards. Reid, I'm coaching youth soccer at the moment with a pro club in the US. I'm still learning about the balance between setting high standards of respect, effort and development, but also creating an environment for these young kids that is fun and welcoming. Curious, in your experience, what the best way to find that balance is?
I think firstly, it has to be enjoyable, depending on the age group. I think I've not worked full-time in academy football, but we're constantly having discussions around it. In maybe the younger players getting too much now, in terms of clips, in terms of all the data, the analysis, the, you know, body testing. It just needs to be enjoyable, needs to be fun. You know, the young players just need to hold on to that for as long as possible, because the tough stuff, you know, the real tough stuff will be coming. You know, you just need, and remember, it is about the players, by the way. It's not about us as coaches. Just keep reminding yourself, are you actually doing the practice? Because, you know, I've done it myself. You might see something online and think that looks, but actually, is it for the players? You know, I think at a younger age, it's got to be more about the enjoyment and the fun. I think as then you're progressing into the professional game, then there is you know, the opposition bit, there is the development bit, and there is the individual work as well. But at a young age, just keep that enjoyment going, different positions on, you know, just I've kind of made a name almost of being a utility player. You know, played every position. You know, just mix it up. Just I'll stick to that. Make it enjoyable, make it fun for as long as possible.
Just one question on that. Sorry, just one question on that. What age do you think it becomes more serious? What age?
I'd say for me, you're starting to probably when you're getting into the full-time game. You know, I do think it is when you leave school and you're in the full-time game, it is starting to become then you will be getting your analysis work, the opposition work, you know, the tactical work. But up to that point, there does need to be, I think, more of a focus on the enjoyment.
Yeah.
I would say, and then obviously a couple of years after that, then you're maybe on the fringe of breaking into a first team or training with the first team. So that sort of transition period there, 16, then it might even be a case we get the odd young player now coming over to. But do you know what? The ones that catch my eye, that come over and train with us from 16 upwards, are the ones that just run around. You know, not the ones that just kind of want to look like but the ones that actually just join us, put tackles in, just run around, running behind, full of energy, you know, try as much as possible to, I know it's difficult at that age to be vocal, but they're the ones that really catch my eye, the ones that just come up and just look like they're just kind of running around and being lively. They're the ones that...
There's a smile on your face when you're saying that. Like, you can tell the joy that it brings you.
Even when I go to games now, because we sort of go to a lot of, you know, academy games, the ones that really catch my eye, the players, are the ones that are a bit of a nuisance, really, that are putting tackles in, that are running in behind, that are kind of just making things happen, like with and without the ball. It doesn't even have to be with the ball, you know, but just that energy, just that enjoyment, because, you know, we're again at that point now where kind of not every, but a lot of players just kind of want to look a player, but without actually doing which, you know, you'd like to think is the easy bit, really, is the actually running around. But that can get you so far in the game. Sounds pretty basic, but I think it's true.
That's very true. It's very, very true.
And not in the same way as making a nuisance as Caulker was at that age either.
Definitely not.
This is actually targeted at Stephen Reid, but I'm going to open it up to both Stephens actually. What would you say is still most needed within football to support players to be and feel their best? And we'll go to Caulks first.
Well, we've spoken a lot about it. I'd say communication, as we've already spoke about. Communication, absolutely. Just we've touched on it, so I don't want to dwell on that bit. I want to say freedom to express himself. When you get recognised as a kid for 8, 9, 10 years of age, you get picked up and taken to the academy nowadays. You get picked up for having a raw talent, right? And so that raw talent, I've seen it so many times get lost because the fear comes in. The manager is instructing you to play this way, play that way, do this, do that. And your head's filled with so much information that you lose what that initial raw talent was that got you scouted. So for me, I look at the freedom. If you want players to express themselves and be the best they're going to be, and give them that freedom. Ronaldinho, Neymar, Messi, some of the best who ever played the game. Maradona's enough play with such freedom. So I just want to see that, like, give them that freedom. Stop saying, yeah, I want you to just express yourself, but make sure you pass it left, right, just information overload. So just a step back from that.
Really?
I agree with that. There's definitely sort of danger of that information overload at the minute, but I think it's sort of coming down to a little bit more now, the education as well, on the coaching courses, more around the emotional intelligence, more around sort of dealing with players that might be struggling. I've presented on a couple of the pro license courses now, and it's only really something that's quite new, like that kind of presentation and kind of sharing my experiences of what I've been through and seen in others. I think a lot more can be done with that, sort of not coming away from the technical side of the game. That's obviously massive now, especially at the top level, but actually splitting that with the mental health aspect of being involved at the elite level or professional level, and just sort of educating the coaches in what to maybe look out for, be aware of, and trying to create that environment where players just feel comfortable to go and deliver, like Caulker says, and play with a bit of freedom.
And this is actually quite an interesting one. We covered this actually when Steve and I had Alex Inglethorpe on from Liverpool. How important do you think that parent education is in managing expectations of the players?
Massive, in my opinion. I've spoke to a lot of youth team coaches over many years, and quite often the biggest problem can be the parents. Not the players themselves. It's actually expectations of parents, and parents kind of stepping across that boundary, into them relationships, and with the coaches, the discussions that they have. But again, I think it's that awareness of maybe, I know Stephen's done his talks and I've done my talks. It's actually that education for the parents within the clubs. I know clubs do it, and we'll have all the parents in at the clubs, for a presentation and making them aware of the pressures and stresses that the player's going to go through anyway. But that's all I can say really. It's just bringing a bigger awareness to the implications of what that, parent-player relationship or the parent-coach relationship, how much that can have a detrimental effect on the player's career, the player's well-being, the relationship within the club.
In the short time that I've been, let's say, working with younger players, trying to help them find them new routes back into the game, the biggest issue that I've come across is probably the parents, definitely. Because the parents have put such a huge expectation on the child to make it, and the child feels that pressure, really feels that pressure, almost feels guilty, feels shame, feels all of it. And it's like the parent wants the best for the child. Like, it's never a case that I've not come across one bad parent or an arsehole. They'll want the best, but it's just knowing what's best. So I think there's a real lack of education. Hence why we do this. I mean, this idea originally came from this will help parents. We haven't actually got as many parents on as we would like over the last 5-6 months, but that will come. The more we spread the message, it's about educating the parents and giving them some support as well.
The rewards, you look at the rewards now potentially. I mean, you could break into a first team now, have an amazing 10-game period, or probably even that. If you get into a first team at top level now and rip it up for a short period of time, that could effectively be yourself and family set up for, if not for life, for a long time. If it was a new 4 or 5 year, or should we say 6, 7, 8 year contract now, what it could be, and social media and looking at everything on there, the trappings, it's just a mixture of all of those things that just add so much pressure onto. And listen, it's hard for the parents as well, by the way, because some of the training schedules of the clubs, the commitment it is to get players to train into the games at the weekend is a huge one.
Definitely. And look, I know we started a couple of minutes late, so we can finish a couple of minutes late, but this one's had a couple of likes actually, so I'm really keen, and it's from Sue. I love your awareness of the need in treating people with respect, giving them space to be heard, acknowledging the challenging environment, etc. How much do you think the lack of diversity of staff in football prevents a wider understanding of the importance of this? And then she just added, as in different perspectives and agendas.
Definitely, it's huge. Like, if I look back at when I went in and joined Roy Hodgson at Crystal Palace, you look at the makeup of the squad at that time, majority black players. Now, if half of those players, or even if a couple of those players feel more comfortable having a conversation with me because I'm a black coach, rather than having it with, which is, listen, it could have it with Roy or Ray Lewington, but if it was me because I was a lot younger than them, black, and they might relate to me a little bit more, then it's a no-brainer. So you need that diversity within the coaching staff, the backroom team, because the same might be said for, it might be a physio, it might be diversity with a masseuse or in the laundry. You know, for one player, that could just that just could be the big difference. So again, yeah, a lot more work needs to be done around that, because I think for me personally, in my experience of that as a coach, I think it's had a real big impact in the teams that I've been involved in.
Definitely. Caulker, anything to add to that?
No.
Do you feel, this is quite a good question, and we might have to end it in a second, but do you feel there's enough education stroke training for players around how to deal with social media and how to cope with abuse, etc.?
There's some. It'd be difficult for me to comment on, you know, what every individual club do. I know, being involved in Sporting Chance and a lot of the clubs that have the life programs that get people in to deliver workshops is way more than it used to be. I think there can always be more. But we also know, being involved in football, it's not easy to get into clubs and deliver the workshops or deliver a presentation. Sometimes clubs can be quite precious with the players and the time that you can get with the players. But there is a lot of good work. I've got to be honest, there is a lot of good work being done. But of course, it's, you know, so much more could be done.
But also, players have to take some accountability, don't they? Do you know what I mean? Like, just listening to there, it's like, because I know for a fact they put on these workshops. I see Lee Wood sat there at Wigan. You know, I know for a fact he puts on lots and lots of workshops throughout the year. So it's like, a lot of the focus there has been on what the clubs can do better, what the coaches can do better. But there's also an element of the player, us as players need to also step up. And I feel like us as senior players can spread that message. You know, us as senior players can really deliver that message from a relatable experience, going, okay, like, this is what it's like, have a think about this and so on, because maybe they're not listening to someone else, but they might listen to the player, especially if it's one of the senior players in the team. So just wanted to touch on that, because I just feel like obviously a lot of it is focused towards the players, like also the player. You know, the player has to take responsibility. I have to take responsibility for my actions.
You did, like I did from the very start. I went to my mum for help. Then I was going to the club doctors at my football clubs, you know, off my own back. You know, when I left Crystal Palace, I rung Sporting Chance off my own back. So yeah, I probably come from it with a view of that as well. And actually, every bit of help that I've got along the way, I've kind of instigated myself. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, Colts.
Definitely. Look, this is going to be the final question. Also, thank you everyone for putting in so many questions into the chat feed. It's been incredible. I did promise that we go back to Ross. So Ross, if you unmute yourself, I know it's quite long-winded apparently, but if you can keep it as short as possible, that would be amazing, mate.
Yeah, I've actually put it in there, but listen, I've actually just launched a mental health organisation for the grassroots game called Tackle This Together, and we're raising the awareness and conversation, education, support around mental health and wellbeing with grassroots clubs, and supporting the 17,000 grassroots clubs to implement mental health first aiders and mental health aware coaches. So you guys have all talked about, you know, you had issues at secondary school with your mental health and the change from playing from a fun level to a pro level, you know, parent pressure, player pressure, all these things happen at both those levels. So how can we connect the grassroots game to the pro game earlier to stop some of these issues? Surely there's a way that we need to be working closer with the grassroots game so that some of these can be implemented, these support mechanisms can be implemented earlier at that level before it gets to a pro level. Are there any ideas on that, basically?
Tough one to end on. Tough one to end on. I'll say a little bit if you want. I'll say a little bit on it. So I know. I speak quite closely with Danny at the Vault, and he's also involved in grassroots football and trying to offer a lot of mental health support in that area. So it's something that I'm familiar with and something that I've looked into. There isn't any real support at all out there right now. So I think what you're doing is amazing. I think, how can we close the gap? We'll close the gap by obviously getting some funding. That's an extremely difficult task to get the Premier League to part with their money. But if the Premier League, the FA, the PFA, whichever, the governing body was to fund grassroots football and to support grassroots football, then I believe then you'd have a far greater opportunity to spend more time. You know, going back to that one point about time that Stephen mentioned at the start of this call, in order to give the time, you need to have some funding for someone to be there to give their time. You know, so I think it's a whole subject in itself. One that I said I'm actually working on and looking at, but that would be my thing on it. Is like, let's start with funding. Let's then give the time and better support these kids, because grassroots is a whole nother issue. We just mentioned today academies and first teams, but grassroots cannot be ignored. Absolutely cannot be ignored.
Yeah, appreciate that. And that's exactly what I'm actually trying to do, is because it's happening at a pro game, but it's not happening at a grassroots game. So if we can start from the bottom up, then it's already in place at whatever level you're playing at from day one when you're a kid. Cheers, appreciate that.
Great stuff, Ross. Look, I'll kind of hand over. Thank you ever so much. Make sure you follow us on our socials as well. We'll be kind of sending you out emails as well with our next kind of guest on it as well. So keep an eye out for kind of what we do. Spread the message as well to kind of your friends, colleagues, loved ones, players, if you've got them in kind of the kind of academies or in your teams. Look, thank you ever so much. But I'll hand over to kind of Corks now to kind of end the evening. And really, thanks ever so much, mate.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you, Paul, for hosting. Been a brilliant host as always. Secondly, thank you to everyone who's been here. So many questions. Apologies we couldn't get through all of them, but as Paul mentioned, follow us on socials, keep in touch. We try to do them monthly. And then lastly, huge thank you to Stephen Reid. Honestly, I said we've known each other the past year, couple of years, but the past year in particular. But I've learned so much today. Really, really insightful. So thanks very much, and good luck on Monday against Burnley. So we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys soon. All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Take care, everyone. See ya.
Thanks.